I never thought the safest place in my life would become the one I feared the most. Home was supposed to mean quiet, comfort, control. That day, it was just silence, the kind that presses against your chest until you notice it. I was alone, scrolling aimlessly, trying to distract myself from a feeling I couldn't name. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the quiet realization that even when I wasn't alone, I still felt like things with him hadn't been right for a while. He used to call without reason, just to hear my voice. Lately, every conversation felt rushed, like I was interrupting something more important. Messages went unanswered for hours. When he did reply, it was short, careless, distant. I kept telling myself I was overthinking, but deep down I knew something had shifted. Or maybe he had that. I remember staring at my phone that afternoon, debating whether to call him again. I didn't. I didn't want to seem desperate, even though I already felt it. It's strange how you can feel abandoned while still technically being in a relationship. Like you're holding on to something that already let go of you. The house was unusually quiet. No TV, no music, just the faint hum of the ceiling fan. I tried to shake off the uneasiness, telling myself I just needed a distraction. I walked from one room to another without purpose, like I was searching for something I couldn't define. That's when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Subtle, but wrong. At first, I froze. My mind tried to explain it away. Maybe it was outside. Maybe it was nothing. But then it came again, louder this time. Something shifted inside me. Instinct, fear, something primal. My heart started racing before my thoughts could catch up. I moved slowly, quietly, every step feeling heavier than the last, and then everything happened too fast. The moment I realized I wasn't alone, the air changed. It felt like the walls closed in, like the space I trusted had turned against me. Panic hit instantly, sharp and overwhelming. I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't move the way I wanted to. Fear doesn't look like it does in movies. It's not loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's silent. Paralyzing. What followed is something I don't relive in detail. Not because I forgot, but because I remember too well. What I can say is this: they didn't just break into my house. They broke something inside me that I didn't even know could be touched. It wasn't just fear. It was helplessness. It was the realization that control is an illusion we hold onto until it's taken away. Time stopped making sense. Seconds felt endless. My mind detached, like it was trying to protect me from what my body was going through. I remember staring at something meaningless, focusing on it just to survive the moment. Just to get through, and then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. Silence came back, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was heavier. Colder. I didn't move at first. I couldn't. My body felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. I sat there, trying to breathe, trying to understand what had just happened. But there are moments in life that don't make sense, no matter how many times you replay them. That I looked around my own home, and it felt unfamiliar. Unsafe. Like I was standing in someone else's life. Everything was the same, yet nothing was. That's when it hit me, not all at once, but in waves. The realization that something had changed permanently. That I reached for my phone eventually, my hands trembling in a way I couldn't control. I wanted to call someone. Him. Anyone. But I just stared at the screen. Who do you even become in a moment like that? What do you say? How do you explain something that doesn't feel real, even when it just happened to you? I didn't cry right away. That's the part people don't talk about. Sometimes, the pain is too big for tears. Sometimes, it just sits inside you, heavy and silent. That I sat there longer than I can remember, trying to piece myself back together, even though I didn't know where to start. The world outside kept moving, completely unaware that mine had just stopped, and in that quiet, broken stillness, one thought kept repeating in my mind: my life would never be the same again. The days after discovering the messages felt unreal. I moved through my routines the way people do when they're trying to function while their mind is somewhere else. Every familiar part of my life suddenly looked different. The house felt colder. Conversations felt forced. Even the quiet moments carried a weight that hadn't been there before. For 2 days I said nothing to my spouse about what I had seen. I needed time to think clearly. Reacting immediately would have turned the situation into a shouting match, and I didn't want anger to control what happened next. What I wanted more than anything was clarity, but pretending everything was normal became impossible. Every time my spouse checked their phone or stepped away to answer a message, the memory of those words came back. "I miss you already." Those 4 words had shattered years of trust in a matter of seconds. Eventually I realized the silence between us was worse than the truth itself. One evening after dinner, I asked if we could talk. My voice sounded calm, but inside my chest my heart was racing. My spouse looked surprised. We rarely had serious conversations anymore. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then I told them I knew. The change in their expression was immediate. Confusion appeared first, followed by a brief flicker of panic. They asked what I meant, but the question sounded weak, like they already understood that I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse them angrily. I simply told them about the message I had seen and the conversation thread that followed. The silence that came afterward felt endless. Finally they exhaled slowly and looked down at the table. That was the moment I knew the truth was real. At first they tried to explain it away. They said it hadn't meant anything serious. They said it had started during a stressful period at work and had gotten out of control. They insisted it wasn't supposed to hurt anyone, but every explanation sounded smaller than the damage it had caused. I asked the only question that truly mattered: how long? The answer hurt more than I expected. The relationship had been going on for months. Almost the entire period when I had been noticing the distance between us. Hearing that confirmed something painful. The loneliness I had been feeling hadn't been imaginary. While I was trying to understand why our relationship felt different, my spouse had already been investing their attention somewhere else. For a few minutes we talked honestly in a way we hadn't in a long time. But the conversation didn't repair anything. If anything, it made the reality clearer. Trust had been broken, and some things can't simply return to the way they were. By the time the discussion ended, I understood something important. Staying in the marriage out of habit or fear wouldn't fix the damage. It would only prolong a situation that had already collapsed. So I made a decision that it wasn't dramatic or impulsive. It was calm, quiet, and deeply certain. That I told my spouse I couldn't continue the relationship. The words felt heavy as they left my mouth, but they also carried a strange sense of relief. For months I had been trying to ignore the growing distance between us. Now the truth had forced everything into the open. The next few weeks were difficult. Separating lives that had been connected for years is never simple. There were practical decisions to make, conversations with family, and moments where the reality of the situation hit harder than expected. But something surprising also happened during that time. Without the constant tension inside my home, I started feeling lighter, not happy exactly, but free from the confusion that had been weighing on me for so long. Through all of it, my neighbor remained quietly supportive. They never pushed themselves into my life or tried to take advantage of the situation. They simply checked in from time to time. Sometimes it was a short conversation outside. Other times it was a quick message asking how I was holding up. Those small gestures meant more than they probably realized. When someone experiences betrayal, it changes the way they see people. Trust becomes fragile. You start questioning intentions, wondering whether kindness is genuine or temporary. But my neighbor never gave me a reason to doubt them. Their support stayed steady and simple. They listened when I needed to talk and respected my space when I needed silence. Months passed, and life slowly began to feel normal again. That I focused on rebuilding routines that belonged entirely to me. Work became easier to concentrate on. Even the quiet evenings at home stopped feeling lonely. During that time, the friendship with my neighbor continued to grow naturally. What started as brief conversations over a fence turned into longer talks during evening walks. We shared stories about our past, our goals, and the strange ways life sometimes changes direction when we least expect it. There was never a moment where things suddenly shifted from friendship to something else. No dramatic confession or sudden realization. Instead, the connection deepened slowly. One evening while we were talking outside, I noticed something simple but meaningful. For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely peaceful, not distracted. Not worried about hidden truths. Just present in the moment. That realization made me smile. A year earlier, I would have never imagined how much my life would change because of something as small as a friendly greeting from the person next door. The betrayal that once felt like the end of everything had quietly pushed me toward a completely different path. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see at the time. Sometimes the people who hurt us reveal the truth we've been avoiding. And sometimes the kindness of someone unexpected becomes the steady ground that helps us stand again. All it took was a neighbor who cared enough to listen, and that simple kindness ended up changing my life in ways I never could have predicted. At some point, doubt stopped feeling like a passing thought and started feeling like a constant presence. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It just stayed there, quietly sitting in the back of my mind, growing heavier with every small thing I couldn't explain. I didn't wake up one day suddenly suspicious. It built itself slowly, piece by piece, until ignoring it felt more exhausting than facing it. The changes became harder to dismiss. It wasn't just delayed replies anymore. It was the way conversations felt forced, like they were happening out of habit instead of desire. There was a distance that couldn't be measured physically, but it was there in every pause, every short response, every moment that used to feel alive and now felt empty. I noticed how attention drifted, how presence became inconsistent. It felt like I was talking to someone who was there, but not really with me. Then came the shift in patterns. Things that used to be predictable suddenly weren't. Timings changed. Routines broke without explanation. There were new gaps in the day that didn't exist before. I tried not to read into it, but my mind kept connecting dots I didn't want to connect. It wasn't one big sign, it was a collection of small ones, aligning in a way that made it impossible to ignore. The phone became the biggest difference. It was always there, but now it felt protected. Turned away slightly. Picked up more quickly than before. Notifications that once went unnoticed were now answered instantly, but not around me. I never saw anything directly, nothing concrete, but the behavior itself was enough to make everything feel off. And the more I noticed it, the more aware I became of how deliberate it all seemed. That's when the overthinking began to take over. Not the casual kind, the kind that keeps you awake longer than you should be, replaying moments over and over, searching for meaning in things that used to feel normal. I started questioning everything. Every word, every delay, every change in tone. I hated it. I hated what it was doing to me, but I couldn't stop. I kept asking myself the same questions I didn't have answers to. Was I imagining this? Was I turning nothing into something? Or was I the only one refusing to accept what was right in front of me? The worst part wasn't the suspicion, it was not knowing if it was real. Instead of confronting it, I tried to fix things in the only way I knew how. I gave more of myself. More attention, more effort, more patience. I tried to bring back the version of us that felt effortless. I started conversations, suggested plans, tried to close the distance that kept growing between us. I thought maybe if I showed enough care, enough consistency, things would shift back, but they didn't. If anything, the more I tried, the more obvious the disconnect became. Responses felt distracted. Effort felt one-sided. It was like trying to hold on to something that wasn't resisting, but wasn't holding back either. That silent lack of effort said more than any argument ever could. There was a moment that stayed with me more than anything else. It wasn't dramatic. No confrontation, no raised voices. Just something small that didn't sit right. A notification that appeared and disappeared too quickly. A name I didn't recognize. A reaction that felt slightly too controlled. It was nothing I could prove, nothing I could call out without sounding unreasonable. But it stayed in my mind longer than it should have. From that point on, something inside me shifted. The doubt was no longer quiet. It started demanding attention. Every new inconsistency added weight to it, making it harder to push aside. I found myself noticing things I would have ignored before. The way eye contact didn't last as long. The way conversations ended abruptly. The way presence felt temporary, like it could disappear at any moment. Sleep became difficult. Not because I was actively thinking all the time, but because my mind refused to rest. Even in silence, even in stillness, there was this constant feeling that something wasn't right. I didn't have proof, but I had a feeling I couldn't shake. And sometimes, that's worse that I thought about asking directly. I really did. There were moments when the question sat right there, ready to be spoken. But every time, I stopped myself. Because once you ask, there's no going back. You either confirm your fears, or you expose your doubt. And I wasn't ready for either. So I stayed in that space. Not knowing, but suspecting. Not confronting, but observing. It was exhausting, living between what I felt and what I could prove. I wanted clarity, but I was afraid of what it would bring, and then, without warning, everything shifted. Not gradually this time. Not subtly that I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. He didn't raise his voice. That's what made it harder to stand there. If he had shouted, accused, or lost control, maybe I could have defended myself, hidden behind anger or denial. But he didn't. He just looked at me, holding the truth in his silence, waiting for me to decide whether I was finally going to stop lying. That I could feel everything collapsing at once. The version of me I had been pretending to be, the balance I thought I was maintaining, the excuses I kept repeating in my head, they all stopped making sense. There was no way to twist this into something harmless anymore. He asked one question. Simple. Direct. Who is he? I didn't answer immediately. Not because I didn't know, but because I knew that answering meant opening the door to everything else I had buried. It wasn't just about another person. It was about every lie, every moment of distance, every choice I made to avoid the truth. So I stopped trying to protect the lies that I told him, not in a dramatic way. Not all at once. The words came out uneven, incomplete at first, but real. I told him about the conversations, about how it started small and became something more. I didn't try to justify it. I didn't pretend it meant nothing. I admitted that it did. He listened without interrupting, but I could see it in his face, the hurt settling in, deeper with every word. Not just because of what I did, but because of how long I had been doing it without giving him a chance to understand. And then came the part one had been avoiding from the beginning. I didn't plan to say it. I didn't prepare for it. But once I stopped lying, it felt impossible to keep that buried too. The truth wasn't separate anymore. Everything was connected. So I told him about that night. The words felt heavier than anything I had ever said before. Not detailed, not explicit, but clear enough that he understood what I had been carrying. I told him how I didn't know how to process it, how I started questioning myself instead of what happened, how I chose silence because it felt easier than facing it. I told him how that silence didn't stay contained. How it spread into everything else. Into us. For the first time, I wasn't holding anything back. He didn't react immediately. He just stood there, trying to take it all in. The betrayal, the confusion, the pain, the pieces of a story he never saw coming. I could see the conflict in his eyes, trying to separate what I had done from what had been done to me, but it wasn't that simple. "I don't know what to say," he finally admitted, and I didn't expect him to. There was no response that could fix what had already happened. No words that could undo the damage on either side. I had hurt him, regardless of why. And at the same time, I had been carrying something that had been slowly breaking me long before I made those choices. Both things were true. "I'm sorry" felt small, but I said it anyway. Not as a way to erase anything, but because it was the only honest thing I had left to offer. I didn't ask him to forgive me. I didn't ask him to stay. I knew I didn't have the right to expect either. That he stepped back slightly, not in anger, but in distance. Like he needed space to breathe, to think, to feel everything without me standing there complicating it further. "I wish you told me," he said quietly. That sentence stayed with me more than anything else, because he was right that if I had told him earlier, maybe things would have been different. Maybe I wouldn't have looked for comfort in the wrong place. Maybe I wouldn't have turned into someone I didn't recognize. But I didn't tell him. I chose silence again and again until silence turned into damage, and now we were standing in the consequences of that we didn't try to fix it right away. There was no sudden resolution, no promise that everything would go back to how it was. Some things don't work like that. Some things, once broken, stay changed no matter how much you try to rebuild them. That he needed time. Space. Distance from everything I had brought into his life without warning, and for the first time, I didn't argue with that I let him go without trying to hold him back. That hurt, but it also felt necessary, because healing doesn't start with holding on to what you've already damaged. It starts with facing it, even if that means losing something important in the process. After that, I stopped pretending at home too. That I stopped adjusting my behavior to avoid him. Stopped shrinking myself to fit into a space that no longer felt safe. The silence between me and my father changed. It wasn't quiet in the same way anymore. It was distant, cold, final. That I didn't confront him the way people imagine. There was no dramatic moment, no shouting, no explanation that could make sense of anything. I just stopped engaging. Stopped responding beyond what was necessary. Stopped allowing him the same control he had always assumed, and that shift mattered, because for the first time, I wasn't questioning myself more than I questioned him. That I started seeing things clearly. Not just what happened, but how it affected everything after. How silence turned into isolation. How isolation turned into poor choices. How those choices hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Understanding that didn't erase anything, but it gave it shape. That it made it real in a way I could finally face. That I didn't come out of it stronger overnight. That's not how it works. There were still moments where everything felt heavy again. Moments where I replayed conversations, questioned decisions, wished I had done things differently, but I wasn't running anymore, and that was the difference. That I lost parts of my life in the process. Trust, connection, the version of love I once had. But I also stopped losing myself piece by piece to silence and fear. The truth didn't fix everything, but it stopped the damage from spreading any further.